To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, welcome and thank you. Your presence makes these stories worth sharing. We'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Ghost's Return. Vincent Ghost Holloway stood in the shadows of the Budapest safe house, watching the rain streak down bulletproof windows. For 15 years, he'd been Langley's most efficient problem solver, the man they called when diplomacy failed and conventional warfare was too messy. 3 months ago, he'd finally walked away from that life, trading his government-issued Glock for the promise of suburban normalcy with his wife Rebecca and their twin daughters. The irony wasn't lost on him that his CIA codename had been Ghost, a man who appeared and vanished without a trace, leaving only silence where chaos once reigned. Now, as he prepared to return home to Portland after wrapping up his final Black Ops assignment, he felt more solid, more real than he had in years. Rebecca's last video call played in his mind, her auburn hair catching the kitchen light as she laughed at something off camera, probably one of their 14-year-old daughter's jokes. Package secured, Ghost. Transport's ready, came a voice from the doorway. His handler, a thin man everyone called Paperclip, gestured toward the waiting helicopter. This assignment, extracting a defected Russian scientist, had been sold to him as a quick 2-week operation. It had stretched into 3 months of cat-and-mouse games across Eastern Europe. Vincent's satellite phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Can't wait to have you home for good. The girls miss their daddy. I've got a surprise waiting for you." 2 hearts. He smiled genuinely for the first time in months. After years of living in the shadows, he was finally ready to step into the light of an ordinary life. He'd already submitted his resignation to Langley, effective immediately upon his return. No more midnight extractions, no more false identities, no more months away from the people who mattered most. The helicopter lifted off into the gray European sky, carrying Vincent toward what he believed would be his new beginning. He had no idea he was flying toward the end of everything he'd ever held sacred. Chapter 2. Strangers in Paradise. The taxi pulled up to 847 Maple Grove Drive at exactly 3:47 p.m. Pacific Time. Vincent paid the driver with cash, old habits, and shouldered his single duffel bag. The house looked exactly as he'd left it. Pristine white colonial with blue shutters, Rebecca's prized rose garden in full bloom, his daughter's bicycles on the porch. Home. But something felt wrong. The lawn was too perfect, recently landscaped. Rebecca hated yard work, always complained about hiring someone to do it properly. And there was a BMW in the driveway, sleek, black, expensive. Not Rebecca's practical Honda, or either of the girls' first cars they'd been saving for. Vincent's training kicked in as he approached the front door. Every sense heightened, muscle memory from 1,000 dangerous situations flooding back. The porch light was on in broad daylight. The welcome mat was new. Even the doorbell looked different. He tried his key. It didn't fit. Before he could process this fully, the door swung open to reveal a man Vincent had never seen before. Tall, athletic, wearing expensive casual clothes and a confused expression that quickly shifted to alarm. "Excuse me, can I help you?" the stranger asked, stepping protectively in front of the doorway. "This is my house," Vincent said simply, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had made hardened terrorists confess their deepest secrets. "Where's my family?" The man's face went pale, but he held his ground. "Sir, I think you're confused. My wife and I just bought this house 3 months ago. The previous owners, well, they said the husband had abandoned them, left them with no choice but to sell." Vincent felt something cold settle in his chest. Not panic, but the deadly calm that preceded violence. "Your wife, Rebecca Morrison," the man said, then seemed to realize his mistake. "I mean, Rebecca Morrison Curtis now. We're newlyweds." The words hit Vincent like a sniper's bullet, precise, devastating, and from an impossible angle. Rebecca Morrison. His Rebecca Morrison. The woman who'd sworn before God and their families that she'd love him until death parted them. "Derek, who is it?" came a voice from inside the house, a voice Vincent knew as intimately as his own heartbeat. Rebecca appeared in the doorway, and Vincent watched her face cycle through shock, terror, and finally a hard resolve he'd never seen before. She was wearing a flowing sundress, her hair styled differently, a new wedding ring glinting on her finger. "Vince," she said, her voice steady despite the circumstances, "you're supposed to be dead. The word hung in the air like a blade. Not missing. Not gone. Dead. Ma'am, do you know this man? Derek Curtis asked, reaching subtly for what Vincent's trained eye recognized as a concealed carry position. Rebecca looked Vincent directly in the eyes, and in that moment, he saw a stranger wearing his wife's face. I've never seen him before in my life. Vincent's phone buzzed. Then Derek's. Then Rebecca's. All at once, as if someone had been watching, waiting for this exact moment. Rebecca glanced at her phone and went white. Derek checked his and took a step backward. Vincent looked at his screen and felt the last piece of his old life crumble into dust. Local news alert. Portland police investigating reports of a disturbed individual claiming to own property on Maple Grove Drive. Homeowners report attempted break-in by man matching description of Vincent Morrison, reported killed in overseas military accident 3 months ago. You called the police, Vincent said, the words more statement than question. Security system is automatic, Derek replied, though his voice shook slightly. Motion sensors, facial recognition. The previous owner was reported deceased, so sirens were already approaching. Vincent could hear at least 3 vehicles, probably more. Rebecca had planned this perfectly, the timing, the story, even the media coverage. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment betrayal. This was a calculated execution of his entire existence. Sir, I'm going to need you to step away from the property, came a voice behind him. Vincent turned to see Officer Bradley Park, a young cop he'd never met, hand resting on his service weapon. Officer, this is my house, Vincent said calmly. My name is Vincent Morrison. I live here with my wife Rebecca and our twin daughters, Emma and Claire. Sir, according to our records, Vincent Morrison died in a training accident 3 months ago. His widow sold this property and moved on with her life. You need to leave now, or I'll have to arrest you for trespassing. Vincent looked back at Rebecca, searching for any trace of the woman he'd loved for 16 years. Instead, he saw cold calculation and something that might have been satisfaction. He reached for his phone. 1 call. That was all it took. Within minutes, a convoy of black Escalades pulled up to the white colonial house. Men in dark suits emerged with the fluid precision of a special forces unit. The lead figure, tall, silver-haired, wearing a badge that caught the afternoon light, approached Officer Park with the confident stride of someone who outranked everyone present. Officer Park, the man said, his voice carrying unmistakable authority. I'm Deputy Director Harrison Mills, Central Intelligence Agency. Do you know who this gentleman is? Officer Park scoffed, his confidence bolstered by procedure and protocol. A trespasser. Some nutcase who thinks he owns property that belongs to the Curtis family. Deputy Director Mills smiled, but it was the cold expression of a predator who'd just spotted prey. Officer, this gentleman is Vincent Morrison, one of our most decorated field operatives. He's been on a classified assignment for the past 3 months. His death was greatly exaggerated. Officer Park's face went pale as the implications hit him. Rebecca took an involuntary step backward, and Vincent saw Derek's hand shake as he lowered it from his concealed weapon. Now, Mills continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than a shout. I suggest we all have a civilized conversation about how Mr. Morrison's property came to be illegally sold while he was serving his country. Vincent looked at Rebecca one last time, memorizing the fear in her eyes. Then he smiled, not the warm expression she'd once loved, but something altogether more dangerous. Hello, darling, he said softly. We need to talk. Chapter 3, The Unraveling. The Portland Police Station's interrogation room had never held a more volatile situation. Vincent sat across from Rebecca and Derek, Deputy Director Mills flanking him like a silent promise of federal consequences. Officer Park stood in the corner, his earlier confidence replaced by the pale realization that he'd nearly arrested a CIA operative. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Vincent said, his voice carrying the same measured tone he'd used to interrogate international terrorists. While I was serving my country in Eastern Europe, my loving wife of 16 years declared me dead, sold our family home, took our daughters, and married another man. All in the span of 3 months. Rebecca lifted her chin defiantly. You were gone, Vincent. Always gone. The girls and I got tired of living like widows. Where are Emma and Claire? Vincent asked, his first display of emotion cracking through his controlled facade. Derek shifted uncomfortably. They're at my sister's place in Seattle. We thought. We thought it would be better if they weren't around when we got settled. Settled into the house you stole from their father, Vincent observed. How thoughtful. Mills opened a thick file folder and spread documents across the table. Mr. Morrison, according to these property records, your wife forged a death certificate, created fraudulent military documentation, and illegally sold property she didn't own. Mrs. Curtis, I should say, this constitutes multiple federal crimes. We have lawyers, Derek said quickly. This was all done through proper legal channels. Rebecca had power of attorney. For emergencies and temporary financial decisions, Vincent interrupted. Not for declaring me dead and remarrying. I'm curious, Derek, how long have you known my wife? The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Derek's eyes flicked to Rebecca, who had gone very still. We met after, Derek said finally, after she became a widow. Vincent pulled out his phone and showed the screen to Mills, who nodded grimly. That's interesting, because according to cell phone records I've just received, Rebecca's phone and yours, Derek, have been in constant contact for the past 8 months. Long before I left for my assignment. Rebecca's composure finally cracked. Vincent, you don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, he said, standing slowly. You and your boyfriend decided I was more valuable dead than alive. The house, my life insurance, my military benefits, my CIA pension. Quite a windfall for a couple of ambitious lovers. The girls were in on it too, Derek blurted, then immediately looked like he wanted to take the words back. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Vincent's eyes went completely cold, and Mills involuntarily reached for his sidearm at the change in his operative's demeanor. Excuse me. Vincent's voice was barely above a whisper. Rebecca's face had gone white. Derek, shut up. Emma and Claire helped plan this. Derek continued, apparently deciding that full confession was his only option. They hated you being gone all the time. Rebecca showed them the financials, how much they'd inherit, how much better their lives would be. They were tired of having a father who was never around. Vincent sat back down slowly, processing this final betrayal. His own daughters, the girls he'd been rushing home to surprise, the ones whose college funds he'd been building with every dangerous mission, had conspired to erase him from existence. They think you're dead, Rebecca said quietly. We had a funeral. They cried. They said goodbye. Don't you dare traumatize them by coming back into their lives now. Traumatize them? Vincent's laugh was sharp and cold. By revealing that their mother is a bigamist and their new stepfather is a co-conspirator and fraud, that they helped steal their own father's life. Mills closed the file folder with a sharp snap. Mrs. Curtis, Mr. Curtis, you're both under arrest for multiple federal crimes. Officer Park, please arrange for Seattle PD to take the Morrison girls into protective custody pending investigation into their involvement in this conspiracy. Wait, Vincent said quietly, and something in his tone made everyone freeze. I want to speak with my family first. All of them. Together. Vincent, that's not a good idea, Mills warned. You're emotionally compromised, and these people have committed serious crimes against you. I'm not planning to hurt them, Vincent said, and his smile was terrifying in its sincerity. I just want to have one last family conversation. Father to daughters. Husband to. Well, to the woman who used to be my wife. Mills studied his operative's face and clearly didn't like what he saw. Vince, what are you thinking? Vincent stood and straightened his jacket, a gesture that somehow looked more like checking weapons than adjusting clothing. I'm thinking that some lessons can only be learned the hard way, and some betrayals require very specific consequences. He looked at Rebecca and Derek, who were both watching him with growing terror. You wanted me dead, he said conversationally. You planned my death, profited from my death, celebrated my death. The only problem with your plan was that I'm very, very hard to kill. Vincent turned to Mills. I'll need a few days to handle this privately before any official charges are filed. Can you arrange that? Mills hesitated. Vincent, whatever you're planning. I'm planning to remind my family why betraying a ghost is the last mistake they'll ever make, Vincent said softly. And I'm going to do it completely within the bounds of the law. The lie came so smoothly that even Mills, who'd known Vincent for over a decade, almost believed it. Chapter 4, The Hunter's Moon. Vincent stood in the penthouse suite of Portland's most exclusive hotel, looking out at the city lights while speaking into his encrypted phone. The room was a far cry from the warm family home he'd thought he was returning to, but it suited his current needs perfectly: secure, private, and completely untraceable to anyone without CI-level clearance. "Yes, I understand the sensitivity of the situation," he said to the voice on the other end. "But I need those background checks completed within 48 hours. Derek Curtis, Rebecca Morrison Curtis, and I want every detail of their lives for the past year." He ended the call and reviewed the files Mills had delivered an hour earlier. The financial records painted a clear picture. Derek Curtis was a software developer who'd made several bad investments and was drowning in debt. Rebecca had been receiving substantial monthly payments from Vincent's CIA pension and life insurance policies since his supposed death. Together, they'd burned through nearly $200,000 in 3 months. But it was the psychological profiles that interested Vincent most. Derek Curtis: narcissistic personality disorder, history of financial fraud in college, 3 previous relationships that ended when he'd cleaned out his partner's bank accounts. Rebecca Morrison: the profile was more disturbing. Clinical sociopathy hidden behind a facade of suburban motherhood. The CIA psychiatrist who'd prepared the report had noted complete lack of empathy and exceptional ability to manipulate intimate relationships. How had he lived with a stranger for 16 years and never seen it? His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Daddy? Is it really you? Emma." Vincent stared at the message for a long moment. His daughter, one of the daughters who'd helped fake his death, was reaching out. The smart play would be to ignore it, to let Mills handle everything through official channels. But Vincent hadn't survived 15 years of black ops by making the smart play. He typed back, "Yes, sweetheart. I'm home." The response came immediately. "Can we meet? Claire and I didn't know. We thought. Please, Daddy. We need to talk." Vincent felt something crack inside his chest, the first genuine emotion he'd allowed himself since discovering the betrayal. Maybe his girls had been manipulated. Maybe Rebecca had poisoned them against him gradually, over months or years of his absence. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Pioneer Courthouse Square. Come alone." "We will. Daddy, we're sorry." Vincent set the phone down and walked to the bathroom mirror. The man looking back was leaner than when he'd left, with new scars on his face and hands from the Eastern Europe assignment. His eyes held the flat emptiness that came from taking lives and making impossible choices. He looked like what he was, a predator. His daughters were 14 years old. Children. If they'd been manipulated into this betrayal, he could forgive them, help them understand the magnitude of what they'd done. Family could be rebuilt on honesty, even after devastating betrayal, if they'd done it willingly. Well, Vincent had learned long ago that blood meant nothing when it was corrupted by poison. Another call came in, Mills, with preliminary surveillance results. "Your wife and her new husband are staying at the Curtis family estate in Lake Oswego," Mills reported. "Big property, private security, lots of places to disappear if they decide to run. They've been making calls to criminal defense attorneys all afternoon. Any attempts to contact the girls?" "None. According to Seattle PD, Emma and Claire have been staying with Derek's sister, Maria Curtis Webb." Interesting detail. Maria works as a family counselor specializing in parental alienation cases. Vincent felt the pieces clicking into place like a weapon being assembled. This wasn't spontaneous. They've been planning this for months, maybe longer. Derek's sister is a professional at turning children against parents. That's our assessment. "Vincent, I need to ask, what are your intentions here? Because if you're planning anything that would compromise the agency." "My intentions are to have a conversation with my daughters," Vincent said calmly. "After that, well, let's see what they have to say for themselves." He ended the call and returned to the window. Somewhere out there, Rebecca was sleeping in another man's bed, wearing another man's ring, spending money she'd stolen from her supposedly dead husband. Derek Curtis was probably congratulating himself on the perfect crime: seduce the wife, eliminate the husband, inherit the life. They'd made one critical error in their planning. They'd assumed Vincent Morrison was the same man who'd left for Eastern Europe 3 months ago, a devoted father and husband who'd never raised a hand in anger to anyone he loved. But Vincent Morrison had died in that Budapest safe house. The man who'd returned was someone else entirely, a ghost with nothing left to lose and a very specific set of skills. His phone rang one more time. Private number, international routing. "Ghost," came a familiar voice with a thick Russian accent. "I hear you have personal troubles. Dmitry Kozlov, arms dealer, information broker, and one of the few criminals in the world who'd earned Vincent's professional respect during a decade of cat-and-mouse games across Europe. Word travels fast in our line of work, Vincent replied. I owe you debt for situation in Prague. Wife and children are safe because of your discretion. I hear your family has betrayed you most cruelly. News travels very fast. I have resources in the United States. Men who are loyal, who understand importance of family honor. If you need assistance with personal matters. Vincent considered the offer. Dimitri's assistance would be thorough, untraceable, and absolutely permanent. It would also mean crossing a line he'd never crossed before, using his professional capabilities against his own family. I'll keep that in mind, Vincent said finally. Is standing off for my friend. Some betrayals require old-world justice. After Dmitri hung up, Vincent returned to studying the files. Tomorrow he would see his daughters for the first time since their betrayal. Depending on what they told him, he would decide whether Emma and Claire Morrison deserved salvation or simply shared the same fate as their mother and her lover. He looked at his reflection in the dark window one more time. The ghost was about to become very real for the people who'd tried to bury him. Chapter 5. Sins of the Daughters. Pioneer Courthouse Square at 2 p.m. was bustling with tourists and street performers, but Vincent spotted his daughters immediately. They sat on a bench near the fountain, Emma nervously checking her phone while Claire stared at her hands. At 14, they were almost young women now, taller than when he'd left, their faces more mature, but somehow harder too. Vincent approached slowly, studying their body language with the analytical eye he'd developed over years of reading targets. Emma saw him first and nudged Claire, who looked up with an expression Vincent couldn't quite read. Fear? Guilt? Relief? Daddy, Emma whispered as he sat down beside them. Girls, he said softly, his voice carrying none of the warmth it once had. You look well. Claire burst into tears immediately. Daddy, I'm so sorry. We thought. Mom said you weren't coming back, that you'd chosen your work over us, and Derek was so nice, and we thought. You thought what exactly? Vincent asked calmly. That I was dead? Or that I deserved to be? Emma shifted uncomfortably. Mom showed us the numbers, Daddy. How much money we'd have for college, for the house, for everything if something happened to you. She said you'd want us to be taken care of. By murdering me? It wasn't supposed to be murder. Claire protested. Mom said your job was dangerous, that it was only a matter of time before something happened anyway. She said we were just preparing for the inevitable. Vincent felt something cold and final settle in his chest. These weren't children who'd been manipulated. These were young women who'd made a calculated choice about their father's worth. Tell me about the planning, he said quietly. Emma glanced around nervously. Daddy, we can't. Emma. Vincent's voice carried the authority that had made international criminals confess their darkest secrets. Tell me about the planning. The words came out in a rush, as if Emma was relieved to finally tell someone the truth. It started about a year ago. Derek came to some of our school events when you were away. Mom introduced him as a friend, and he was so present, you know? He came to our games, helped with homework, took us shopping. He was everything you weren't. And then, Vincent prompted. Mom started showing us articles about CIA agents who died overseas, Claire continued. She said it was dangerous work, that most operatives didn't live to retire. She asked us what we wanted, a father who was never there, or a chance at a real family with someone who loved us enough to stay. Derek showed us houses we could afford with your life insurance money, Emma added. Better schools, college funds, vacations. He said we deserved better than wondering if our father was coming home. Vincent absorbed this information without visible reaction, but inside, something was breaking down on a molecular level. Whose idea was the fake death certificate? Derek's, Claire said quickly. He has a friend who works at the county office. He said if we filed the right paperwork while you were away, by the time anyone noticed, it would be too late to change things easily. And the funeral? We really cried, Emma said, as if this somehow made the betrayal less complete. Even though we knew you weren't really dead, we cried for the father we'd lost. The one who used to read us bedtime stories and take us camping before your job became more important than us. Vincent stood slowly, his decision crystallizing with perfect clarity. These weren't his daughters anymore. These were strangers who happened to share his DNA, strangers who'd weighed his life against material benefits and found him wanting. Do you know what I did for 3 months while you were spending my death benefits? He asked conversationally. Some kind of mission, Claire said uncertainly. I killed 17 people, Vincent said calmly, watching their faces go pale. 17 enemies of our country who threatened national security. I took their lives without hesitation because it was necessary for the greater good. Emma shrank back against the bench. Daddy, you're scaring us. You should be scared, Vincent said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than a shout. Because you betrayed your own father for money. You looked at my life and decided it was worth less than Derek Curtis's promises. You attended my funeral and cried crocodile tears while planning to spend the insurance money. We were just kids. Claire protested. Mom and Derek, they convinced us. You were old enough to understand right from wrong. Vincent cut her off. Old enough to choose between loyalty and greed. You made your choice. Now you live with the consequences. He pulled out his phone and showed them a document Mills had prepared. This is a formal statement of disownment. As of today, you are no longer my daughters. Emma Morrison and Claire Morrison no longer exist in my world. You can't do that. Emma gasped. We're family. Family doesn't plot each other's deaths, Vincent replied. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't betray each other for money. You are Rebecca Curtis's daughters now. I'm sure Derek will make a wonderful stepfather. Claire grabbed his arm desperately. Daddy, please. We can fix this. We can be a family again. Vincent looked down at her hand on his arm. The same hands that had helped forge his death certificate. The same hands that had counted his blood money. He gently but firmly removed her grip. There's nothing to fix, he said quietly. You killed Vincent Morrison 3 months ago. What stands before you now is simply the ghost you created. He started to walk away, then paused and looked back. Oh, and girls, you might want to call your mother. Tell her I'll be seeing her very soon. As he disappeared into the crowd, Vincent heard Claire's anguished sobs and Emma's desperate calls for him to come back. But the ghost felt nothing at all. His family was dead. Now it was time to bury them properly. Chapter 6. The Devil's Bargain. The Lake Oswego estate sat on 12 acres of manicured grounds, protected by high walls and private security. Vincent watched the property through night vision binoculars from a wooded hillside half a mile away, cataloging patrol patterns and security weaknesses with the methodical precision of a predator studying prey. His encrypted phone buzzed, a text from Dmitry Kozlov. Package delivered to Portland Safe House. My gift to a friend in time of need. Vincent lowered the binoculars and smiled coldly. Dmitry's package would be tools of the trade, untraceable weapons, surveillance equipment, and other specialized hardware that couldn't be requisitioned through official CIA channels. The Russian arms dealer had clearly decided that Vincent's personal war deserved professional support. Another text, this one from Mills. Curtis family hired Blackwater Security. 6 guards, former military. Rebecca and Derek haven't left the property since your daughters contacted them. Vincent typed back. Current status of federal charges? On hold pending your personal resolution. Agency position is that this is family matter requiring discretion. You have 72 hours before we move to official prosecution. 72 hours. More than enough time to destroy 2 lives completely. Vincent's phone rang, unknown local number. Vincent. The voice was Rebecca's, but strained and desperate. We need to talk. Mrs. Curtis, Vincent replied formally. I wasn't aware we had anything to discuss. The girls called. They said you disowned them. I did. They're your daughters now. You're welcome to them. Silence stretched across the line, broken only by Rebecca's ragged breathing. Vincent, please. We can work this out. The house, the money, everything. We can split it fairly. You can have the girls back. We can share custody. Share custody? Vincent's laugh was sharp and cold. Rebecca, you declare me dead. You married another man. You turned my own children against me. There's nothing to share because nothing you have belongs to you. Then what do you want? The desperation in her voice was palpable. I want you to understand what you've done, Vincent said softly. I want you to feel every consequence of your choices. I want you to lose everything you stole from me, piece by piece, until you're left with nothing but the knowledge that you destroyed your own family for 30 pieces of silver. Vincent, you're frightening me. Good. You should be frightened. You betrayed a man trained to eliminate threats with extreme prejudice. The only reason you're still breathing is that I'm curious to see how long it takes you to destroy each other. He ended the call and returned his attention to the estate. Through the scope of a high-powered telephoto lens, he could see movement in the main house, figures passing behind windows, the occasional flash of security personnel making their rounds. His phone buzzed with another message, this one from an encrypted account he didn't recognize. Your wife and her lover have been very busy since your return. Bank records show large transfers to offshore accounts. They're planning to run. Vincent frowned. The message was signed with a single initial, M. He typed back, "Who is this?" "Someone who appreciates professional work. Your wife made enemies before she made you one. Check your email." Vincent accessed his secure email account and found a comprehensive dossier on Derek Curtis that went far beyond what Mills had provided. Curtis wasn't just a failed software developer with debt problems. He was a professional con man who specialized in targeting recently widowed women. Rebecca was his fourth victim in 5 years. The previous 3 had all suffered tragic accidents after transferring their assets to Curtis. Rebecca Morrison hadn't just betrayed her husband. She'd fallen victim to a serial predator who killed his marks after bleeding them dry. Another message appeared. Curtis plans to eliminate Rebecca within the week. Make it look like suicide. Guilt over betraying beloved husband. Depression over children's rejection. Very tidy. Vincent stared at the screen, feeling pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. Derek Curtis was planning to murder Rebecca, just as he'd murdered his previous victims. The timing was perfect. Wait for the federal heat to die down. Eliminate the only witness to the conspiracy. Inherit everything as the grieving widower. His phone rang again. Mills. Vincent, we've got a problem. Derek Curtis just hired a very expensive criminal defense attorney. The kind who specializes in making federal cases disappear. We're getting pressure from above to wrap this up quickly before it becomes a public relations nightmare. How much pressure? The kind that could end my career if I don't deliver results in the next 48 hours. Vincent, I need you to make a decision here. Do we prosecute this through official channels? Or do you handle it your way and we clean up afterward? It was the question Vincent had been expecting since the moment he'd discovered the betrayal. Mills was offering him a choice. Justice through the system, or justice through methods that would leave no room for appeals or technicalities. What about the girls? Vincent asked. Minors, manipulated by adults, first offense. They'd probably get community service and counseling. Fresh start, new identities if needed. Vincent considered this. Emma and Claire would escape meaningful consequences for their betrayal, free to continue the lives they'd chosen over their father. Meanwhile, Rebecca would face federal prison if Derek Curtis didn't murder her first. I need to think about it, Vincent said finally. You have until tomorrow night. After that, we go official regardless. Vincent ended the call and returned to watching the estate. In the distance, he could see Rebecca's silhouette in an upstairs window, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. She was trapped between federal prosecution and a husband who planned to kill her, with nowhere to run and no one to trust. It was almost enough to make Vincent feel sorry for her. He thought of his daughter's faces in Pioneer Courthouse Square, the cold calculation he'd seen there, the way they'd weighed his life against Derek's promises. They'd made their choice, and now they would live with it. Vincent reached for his secure phone and typed a message to the mysterious M. I'm interested in your information about Curtis. What do you want in return? The response came immediately, front row seat to the show. Some betrayals deserve an audience. Vincent smiled grimly and began planning his final act of vengeance. Rebecca and Derek had tried to bury him. Now he would return the favor, but he would make sure they were still breathing when the dirt hit their faces. Chapter 7. The News Titans. Vincent sat in the Portland safe house Dimitri had arranged, surrounded by enough military-grade surveillance equipment to monitor a small war. On one wall, multiple screens showed live feeds from cameras he'd positioned around the Curtis estate. On another, financial records traced the flow of money from his accounts to offshore holdings that Derek Curtis thought were untraceable. The mysterious M had delivered on their promise of information. Derek Curtis was indeed a serial killer who specialized in targeting wealthy widows, but the scope of his operation was staggering. Over the past decade, he'd murdered at least 7 women after draining their assets, always making the deaths appear accidental or self-inflicted. Rebecca wasn't his victim, she was his partner. Vincent studied the psychological profiles spread across his desk. Rebecca Morrison had been psychologically evaluated twice during their marriage, both times during periods when Vincent's CIA work had required extended absences. The reports, hidden from him at the time, painted a picture of a woman with severe narcissistic personality disorder and sociopathic tendencies. She hadn't been manipulated by Derek Curtis. She'd been looking for someone exactly like him. Phase 1 is complete, he said into his encrypted phone. Mills was on the other end, receiving updates from an operation that officially didn't exist. Derek Curtis's financial records have been leaked to the IRS, FBI, and Portland police simultaneously, Mills reported. Anonymous tip about tax evasion led to discovery of the offshore accounts and suspicious insurance payouts from his previous relationships. Local news is already picking up the story. Vincent switched to a live news feed on one of his monitors. A reporter stood outside the Curtis estate, describing Derek as a person of interest in multiple suspicious deaths. The story had everything local news loved: wealthy families, mysterious deaths, and now a CIA agent's family caught in the web. What about Rebecca? More interesting. She's been reaching out to old contacts from her past, people you never knew about. Turns out your wife has been leading a double life longer than you've been married. She has another identity, complete with passport and credit history. She's been planning an exit strategy for years. Vincent felt a familiar cold calm settle over him. Show me. His computer chimed with incoming files. Rebecca's secret identity was thorough and professional. Sarah Chun, freelance writer, no family connections, significant savings account funded by small transfers over 15 years of marriage. She'd been stealing from him systematically, not just since Derek Curtis entered the picture, but from the very beginning of their relationship. Their entire marriage had been a con job. Vincent, Mills continued, there's something else. Rebecca reached out to the Chinese consulate 3 hours ago. She's claiming her real name is Sarah Chun, that she's a Chinese national being persecuted by a rogue CIA operative. She's requesting emergency extraction. Vincent set down the file and looked at Rebecca's image on the surveillance monitor. She was in Derek's study, frantically packing documents into a briefcase while Derek paced behind her, clearly agitated. She's running, Vincent observed. Gets worse. We have intercepts of phone calls between Rebecca and unknown contacts in Beijing. She's been feeding information about your assignments to Chinese intelligence for at least 3 years. Vincent, your wife is a Chinese spy. The words hit Vincent like a physical blow. Not just betrayal, not just greed, but treason. Every mission he'd shared details about, every operation he'd discussed at home, every classified location he'd mentioned, Rebecca had been transmitting it all to Beijing. How many of my operations were compromised? He asked quietly. We're still analyzing, but potentially dozens. The Budapest extraction that kept you away for 3 months? Beijing knew about it from the beginning. You weren't delayed by complications, Vincent. You were deliberately kept away so Rebecca could execute her exit plan. Vincent felt the last vestiges of emotional attachment to his former life crumble to dust. Rebecca hadn't just betrayed him personally. She'd betrayed his country, endangered his colleagues, potentially caused the deaths of other operatives whose missions had been compromised. What's the agency's position on this? Vincent asked. Officially, Rebecca Morrison Curtis is now a high-priority national security threat. Capture or elimination is authorized under executive order. Unofficially, she's your problem to solve however you see fit. Vincent studied the surveillance feeds one more time. Derek and Rebecca were clearly preparing to run, but they were also clearly terrified. They'd received information about the federal investigation, about Derek's past victims being discovered, about Rebecca's espionage activities being exposed. They were trapped animals, dangerous and unpredictable. What about the girls? Vincent asked, though he already knew the answer would hurt. Emma and Claire Morrison are also persons of interest in the espionage investigation. They may have been unknowingly recruited as assets, or they may have been willing participants. Their computer records show they've been in contact with Rebecca's Chinese handlers for over a year. His daughters, the children he'd once loved more than his own life, had been spying on him for a foreign government. Every detail about his schedule, his assignments, his security protocols that he'd mentioned at home had been systematically reported to Beijing through his own family. Vincent's phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Daddy, we're scared. Mom and Derek are acting crazy. They want us to come to Portland tonight. They say we're all leaving the country together. Please help us. For a moment, Vincent felt the old paternal instincts stir. His girls were reaching out, asking for help. Maybe they really had been manipulated. Maybe they were just children caught in an adult conspiracy they didn't understand. Then he remembered the cold calculation in their eyes at Pioneer Courthouse Square, the way they'd weighed his life against money, the fact that they'd been reporting his movements to foreign intelligence for over a year. He typed back, "You made your choice. Live with it." Another message came immediately. "We're your daughters. You can't abandon us." Vincent looked at the words for a long moment, then deleted the conversation without responding. Emma and Claire Morrison had ceased to exist the moment they betrayed him. Whatever happened to them now was simply the natural consequence of their choices. His secure line rang. "Dmitry Kozlov. My friend, I have interesting intelligence about your family situation. Your wife is not just unfaithful, she is foreign operative. Very dangerous woman. I'm aware of that now. Beijing is sending extraction team tonight. Private jet at Portland International, scheduled departure at midnight. If she reaches China, she disappears forever, along with all information about compromised operations." Vincent checked the time, 9:17 p.m. Less than 3 hours before Rebecca escaped justice entirely. "Dmitry, do you still have assets in Portland?" "Of course. Old world justice, as I promised. What do you need?" Vincent looked at the surveillance feeds one last time. Rebecca and Derek were loading suitcases into a black Mercedes. His daughters would be arriving soon, unknowing participants in their mother's final betrayal of American intelligence. "I need them to never reach that airport," Vincent said quietly. "Consider it done, my friend. Some betrayals require permanent solutions." As Vincent ended the call, he felt the last piece of his old identity die. Vincent Morrison, loving father and devoted husband, no longer existed. What remained was the ghost, a man with no family, no attachments, and no mercy for those who tried to bury him alive. It was time to finish what his family had started. Chapter 8, Blood and Ashes. Vincent positioned himself on a hillside overlooking the interstate route to Portland International Airport, watching the traffic through night vision scope. At 11:23 p.m., the black Mercedes containing his former family passed beneath the overpass, where Dimitri's team waited in position. The operation was surgically precise. 3 black SUVs blocked the Mercedes from front and rear, while a 4th approached from the side. No violence, no drama, just professional interception by men who understood the importance of keeping family betrayals private. Vincent's encrypted radio crackled, package secured. All targets acquired alive and unharmed. Understood. Bring them to the warehouse. Vincent drove through the Portland Industrial District to a building that officially didn't exist, one of several CIA safe houses used for interrogations that required absolute discretion. Inside, his former family sat zip-tied to metal chairs in a windowless room under harsh fluorescent lights. Rebecca looked up as Vincent entered, and for the first time since his return, he saw genuine fear in her eyes. Derek Curtis appeared to be in shock, his face pale and sweaty. Emma and Claire huddled together, tears streaming down their faces. "Hello, family," Vincent said conversationally, settling into a chair across from them. "I thought we should have one final conversation before you leave for Beijing." "Vincent, please," Rebecca began, but he cut her off with a gesture. "Sarah Chun," he said, using her spy name. "That's your real identity, isn't it? Sarah Chun, Chinese intelligence operative, deployed to infiltrate and compromise CIA operations through intimate access to field personnel." Rebecca's face went completely white. "How did you know about your real mission?" "Because I'm very good at my job, Sarah. The same job you've been sabotaging for 3 years. The same job that's kept you and our daughters safe while you sold our national secrets to Beijing." He turned to Derek Curtis, who was staring at the floor. "And you, professional killer, targeting widows for their insurance money. 7 dead women before you met Sarah. Did you know she was a foreign agent when you started planning my death? Or was that just a happy coincidence?" "We never meant for anyone to get hurt," Derek said weakly. Vincent laughed coldly. "You planned to murder me and steal everything I owned. Now you're claiming you didn't mean for anyone to get hurt." He stood and began pacing slowly around their chairs, like a predator circling wounded prey. "Let me explain your situation. Derek, you're wanted by the FBI for multiple murders. The evidence is overwhelming, and the death penalty is almost certain. Sarah, You're wanted for espionage and treason. Also death penalty, by the way. Vincent paused in front of his daughters. Emma and Claire Morrison are wanted as material witnesses in a federal espionage case. Their computers contained classified information that was transmitted to Chinese intelligence. At minimum, they're looking at 20 years in federal prison. Claire began sobbing harder. Daddy, we didn't know it was wrong. You knew, Vincent said quietly. You knew when you helped plan my fake death. You knew when you spent my insurance money. You knew when you passed information about my work to your mother's contacts. You made choices, and now you face consequences. He returned to his chair and studied their faces. However, I'm prepared to offer you a deal. Rebecca lifted her head hopefully. What kind of deal? Vincent smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression any of them had ever seen. The kind that ensures justice is served while keeping this mess out of the newspapers. He pulled out a thick folder and spread documents across the table. Derek, these are signed confessions to all 7 murders you've committed, along with detailed descriptions of how you plan my death. Sign them, and I'll arrange for you to be transferred to a federal facility where you'll serve life without parole instead of facing execution. Derek stared at the papers with wide eyes. And if I don't sign? Then you're handed over to the families of your previous victims. They're surprisingly creative when it comes to revenge, and some of them have interesting connections to organized crime. Vincent turned to Rebecca. Sarah, your confession details every piece of classified information you transmitted to Beijing, every operation you compromised, every American agent whose life you endangered. Sign it, and you'll be transferred to a black site where you'll spend the rest of your life in solitary confinement. Don't sign it, and you'll be handed over to the Chinese government as a failed asset who exposed their intelligence network. They'll execute me, Rebecca whispered. Eventually, Vincent agreed. But first they'll want to know exactly what you told the Americans about their operations. Chinese interrogation techniques are thorough. Finally, he looked at his daughters. Emma and Claire have a different choice to make. He placed 2 more documents on the table. These are voluntary commitments to federal witness protection. New identities, new lives, complete separation from your mother and Derek. You'll testify against them, then disappear into new families that will teach you the meaning of loyalty. And if we don't, Emma asked through her tears, then you stand trial as adults for espionage and conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence is overwhelming, and federal juries don't tend to be sympathetic toward traitors, regardless of age. Vincent stood and checked his watch. You have 10 minutes to decide. After that, other people will make decisions for you, and they won't be nearly as generous as I'm being. For several minutes, the only sound in the room was Claire's quiet sobbing. Then Derek reached for a pen with shaking hands. I'll sign, he said hoarsely. I'll sign everything. Rebecca stared at him in horror. Derek, you can't. I'm not dying for you. Derek snarled, his composure finally cracking. This whole plan was insane from the beginning. I should have killed you 3 months ago like I did the others. Vincent watched with clinical interest as his former family turned on each other. Rebecca lunged at Derek, screaming accusations, while Emma and Claire watched their mother reveal her true nature in all its ugly reality. I think that's quite enough, Vincent said quietly, and something in his voice made everyone freeze. Sarah, Derek, you've made your choices clear. What about you girls? Emma looked at her mother, really looked at her, and Vincent saw the exact moment when his daughter realized she'd been manipulated by a monster. We'll sign, she whispered. We'll testify. Claire nodded through her tears. We want new families. We want to forget all of this ever happened. Vincent felt no satisfaction at their choice, no joy in their suffering. These people had once been the center of his world, and now they were nothing more than problems to be solved with professional efficiency. Very well, he said, collecting the signed documents. Your new lives begin now. He walked toward the door, then paused and looked back one final time. For what it's worth, I hope you find peace in your new identities. The people you used to be are dead now, just like the man you tried to kill 3 months ago. As Vincent left the warehouse, he could hear Rebecca screaming his name, begging for mercy, promising to make amends. But the ghost felt nothing at all. His family was dead. Finally, truly, completely dead. Chapter 9, Resurrection. 6 months later, Vincent Morrison stood in his new home in the mountains of Colorado, watching the sunrise paint the peaks gold and crimson. The house was smaller than the one he'd lost in Portland, but it was his. purchased with money that hadn't been stolen, built on land that couldn't be taken away by betrayal. The official story, released to a carefully controlled media cycle, was both simpler and more complex than the truth. Derek Curtis had been arrested for multiple murders and died in federal custody under suspicious circumstances. Sarah Chun, revealed to be a Chinese spy who had infiltrated American society under a false identity, had been transferred to a classified facility where she remained in indefinite detention. Two minor children, whose identities were protected due to their age, had been placed in witness protection after testifying against their parents. Vincent Morrison, decorated CIA operative, had been granted early retirement with full honors after his service was compromised by enemy espionage. He'd requested assignment to a remote location where he could serve his country while rebuilding his life away from painful memories. The truth was darker and more complete. Derek Curtis had signed his confessions, then been found dead in his cell 3 days later, apparent suicide, though the autopsy showed signs consistent with professional assassination. Rebecca/Sarah remained in a black site facility, providing intelligence about Chinese operations in exchange for better living conditions. She would never see daylight again. Emma and Claire Morrison had been given new identities and placed with carefully selected families who specialized in rehabilitating children damaged by parental manipulation. Vincent received quarterly reports on their progress, but had requested no direct contact. As far as the world was concerned, their father was dead, and they were orphans building new lives. Vincent's secure phone rang, interrupting his morning coffee. "Mills, Ghost, we have a situation that requires your particular expertise," his former handler said. "Foreign operative has infiltrated a senator's family, similar to your previous experience. The agency would like your consultation on how to handle it." Vincent considered the request. He could refuse, continue his retirement in mountain solitude, let other people handle the world's problems. But the skills that had made him deadly in the field also made isolation eventually unbearable. "Send me the files," he said finally. "I'll review and advise." "Actually, Vincent, this is more than consultation. We're forming a new unit, specialists who handle cases where national security intersects with personal betrayal. Operatives who understand that sometimes the greatest threats come from the people we trust most." Vincent walked to his window and looked out at the pristine wilderness. For months, he'd been trying to rebuild something resembling a normal life. But normal was a luxury he'd forfeited the moment he'd chosen to become a ghost. "What's the unit called?" he asked. "Lazarus Protocol. For operatives who've been buried by betrayal and need to rise again." Vincent smiled grimly. It was fitting, a resurrection program for the professionally dead. "When do we start?" "Your first case briefing is tomorrow in Denver." "Vincent, I should warn you. This new assignment involves a similar family dynamic to what you experienced. Are you sure you're ready for that?" Vincent thought of Rebecca's face in that warehouse, Derek's final betrayal, his daughter's choice to abandon their father for a chance at a different life. The pain was still there, would always be there, but it had crystallized into something harder and more useful. Perfect clarity about human nature and the price of misplaced trust. "I'm ready," he said quietly. "Someone needs to hunt the monsters who hide behind family bonds. Who better than someone who's seen how deep that betrayal can go?" After ending the call, Vincent returned to his coffee and his sunrise. In a few hours, he would begin the process of hunting another family destroyer, another person who used love as a weapon and trust as a vulnerability to exploit. The ghost was officially back in business. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Heard about your new assignment. If you need old-world justice again, you know how to reach me. D." Vincent smiled and deleted the message. Dmitry Kozlov's network remained available if circumstances required solutions that couldn't be achieved through official channels. Some betrayals, after all, required more permanent consequences than federal prison could provide. Another message appeared, this one from a different unknown number. "Watched your work on the Curtis case. Impressed. If you're interested in freelance opportunities that pay better than government work, I have clients who appreciate your particular skill set. M." Vincent considered this message longer before deleting it. The mysterious M, who had provided intelligence during his family's destruction, was apparently in the business of connecting skilled operatives with private clients. It was worth remembering for the future when government restrictions became too limiting. A final message arrived as Vincent prepared to leave for Denver. "Daddy, it's Emma. My new family is nice, but I think about you every day. I know we can never be family again, but I want you to know that I understand what we did was wrong. I hope someday you can forgive us." Vincent stared at the message for a long time. Emma, who now lived under a different name, in a different state, with parents who would never betray her trust, was reaching out across the void their choices had created. Part of him, a very small part, wanted to respond with forgiveness and hope for reconciliation. But Vincent Morrison, devoted father, was dead. The ghost had no children, no family, no attachments that could be used against him. He deleted the message without responding and blocked the number. Some resurrections required letting the dead stay buried. Vincent locked his mountain home and drove toward Denver, toward his new assignment, toward a life dedicated to hunting the monsters who destroyed families from within. He'd learned the hardest lesson of all: love could be weaponized, trust could be fatal, and family could be the most dangerous enemy of all. But he'd also learned that ghosts were uniquely qualified to hunt other ghosts, and that sometimes the only way to truly live was to embrace being professionally dead. The road stretched ahead, leading toward new cases, new betrayals, new opportunities to ensure that family destroyers faced consequences worthy of their crimes. Vincent Morrison drove toward his future with the calm satisfaction of a man who'd finally found his true calling. Behind him, the mountain sunrise painted the sky blood red, like a promise of justice for those who thought they could bury the ghost and get away with it. They couldn't. They never could. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.